Dear students, now we begin with our new topic, that is development of cardiovascular system, and in this we will begin with the development of heart. But development of heart in detail, let us discuss the introductory things about the development of blood vessels in the embryo, because basically heart is also to be regarded as a blood vessel, of course with a very wide lumen, unusually thick muscular walls, but after all it conducts blood and it pumps blood, so it is a special type of blood vessel. First we will take uh, this topic, that is how blood vessels are formed in the embryo. This formation of embryonic blood vessels, it begins in the third week, and obviously from your knowledge of general embryology, which you studied in your first year, you know that all types of blood vessels are derivatives of mesoderm. Mesoderm gives rise to a pluripotent tissue which is called mesenchyme, and mesenchyme gives rise to many derivatives including blood vessels. Now the this formation of embryonic blood vessels takes place in two manners, two ways. One is called as vasculogenesis, the other is known as angiogenesis. So let us see what is the difference between vasculogenesis and angiogenesis. In vasculogenesis, first blood islands are formed. What are blood islands? Blood islands are small collections of cells which are called angioblasts or hemangioblasts, which are derived from mesenchymal cells. So mesenchymal cells differentiate into hemangioblasts, and hemangioblasts form small masses, cords, small groups, clusters of hemangioblasts, and these clusters are known as blood islands. And in each blood island, the peripheral cells differentiate into endothelial cells, and the central cells, the central hemangioblasts, they differentiate into primitive RBCs or erythrocytes. Obviously, the peripheral endothelial cells differentiating from peripheral angioblasts will form the wall of the blood vessel, uh, basically the lining endothelium, meaning the endothelium is formed from the angioblasts, and later on, as the development proceeds and arteries and veins of different types are formed, then around the endothelium other layers are also formed, connective tissue and smooth muscle or maybe cardiac muscle as in heart. So this method of formation of uh, embryonic blood vessels is called vasculogenesis. And when the islands, which are in the beginning solid masses of angioblasts, and they become converted into small hollow tube-like structures lined by endothelium containing primitive erythrocytes, and they form primitive capillaries as they gradually elongate, and then these capillaries, they merge with each other, fuse with each other, and thus these capillaries form networks. And it is to be noted that some of the mesenchymal cells, they differentiate into pericytes which lie outer to the endothelium of capillaries. So that is how the vasculogenesis occurs. Capillaries are formed in the beginning and later on, as the case may be, arterioles or arteries and venules and veins will be formed. Angiogenesis is the second way of formation of blood vessels. In this, no blood islands are formed, but new capillaries are formed by budding and sprouting from the existing capillaries. The capillary networks which have been formed as a result of vasculogenesis, these capillary networks give rise to sprouts and buds, and these sprouts and buds grow and thus new capillaries are formed. This method of formation of blood vessels is called angiogenesis. So obviously first vasculogenesis occurs, and when capillary networks have been formed by vasculogenesis, then angiogenesis can occur in any region as the case and as the need may be, according to the need of the local network in the region in which it is developing. New blood vessels are formed then by angiogenesis. And as I've told you, later on, the capillaries will remain as capillaries, but other capillaries will enlarge in diameter and they will acquire connective tissue and smooth muscle coats and will give rise to arteries and veins. And here we can also talk of hemopoiesis. We have just talked about vasculogenesis and angiogenesis, that is formation of blood vessels, but hemopoiesis, that is formation of blood. How the blood is formed? Though the primitive RBC are formed from the central angioblasts of the blood islands, but those are very primitive and we require the formation of RBCs and WBCs to be passed into the capillaries and into the vascular system, and this begins to occur in the second month of development. And the liver is the first organ which takes on the function of hemopoiesis, and it actively forms blood cells. The WBC, RBC, platelets, all these elements are produced by the hemopoietic tissue present in the liver, but not throughout the fetal life, but from second month to seventh month. And after, as the seventh month is approached, then the hemopoietic capacity of the liver and activity of the liver decreases, and this function is then taken on by bone marrow. The red bone marrow becomes the chief site of blood formation, and by the time the baby is born, the liver is not forming blood, and the function of formation of blood cells has been taken over completely by the bone marrow. Although liver retains capacity to form blood in case it is needed in later life under some special conditions like heavy loss of blood or other diseases causing blood depletion, then liver may be stimulated to take up the function of formation of blood, but normally liver does not form blood after birth, and the blood formation or hemopoiesis occurs in the red bone marrow. Now this diagram you can see on the right side and on the left side. On the left side is the vasculogenesis, that is formation of blood vessels from the blood island. You can see a blood island in which the peripheral cells are forming, peripheral angioblasts are forming endothelial cells, and the central ones are forming the primitive red blood cells, and these cells, the endothelial cells, for the angioblasts which are forming endothelial, they also secrete primitive plasma, so that the newly formed capillaries are filled by this fluid in which these primitive RBC are uh, immersed, that is primitive plasma. So vasculogenesis under vascular endothelial growth factor 1 and 2, the, the capillary plexuses are formed. As you can see, primary capillary plexuses are formed, and then angiogenesis can occur. Once capillary plexuses have been formed, angiogenesis is sprouting, as you can see in the diagram, budding or sprouting from the capillaries. Sprouts are now rising, buds which are growing to form branches of these capillaries. So the capillary network becomes more and more elaborate, more and more complicated, and you can also see that the mesenchymal cells, some of them are differentiating into smooth muscle cells, and some of them are differentiating into pericytes. The simple capillaries are just having pericytes outer to the endothelium, and then as we go to the arterioles or venules, smooth muscles also appear, which are also differentiated from the surrounding mesenchyme. So this is the diagram showing the formation of blood vessels by vasculogenesis and by angiogenesis. Now this is a diagram of the heart, just to make you familiar with what you studied in your first year. The four chambers of the heart: the right atrium, the left atrium, the left ventricle, the right ventricle, and if you take another view of the sectioned heart, you can see the interior of the heart as well. You can see the interventricular septum, you can see the interatrial septum, and then you can see the four chambers of the heart. You can see the valves, the aortic valve, also semilunar valve, and the mitral valve, and the tricuspid valve, the right ventricle, left ventricle with papillary muscles, chordae tendineae, opening of the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava in the right atrium, the opening of pulmonary veins in the left atrium. This all you have studied, but this is just for uh, repetition and recapitulation of previous knowledge, because we are going to discuss the development of heart now, and you must have a knowledge of gross anatomy of heart to understand the development of heart. So it is basically a blood vessel microscopically, though it is a pump functionally, but structurally this is a blood vessel and is lined by endothelium, and like all blood vessels, it is derived from mesoderm, or you can say mesenchyme, and the special cells which originate in the epiblast migrate through the primitive streak, the cranial part of the primitive streak just before the primitive node. The cells of epiblast which pass through the cranial part of the primitive streak, they form splanchnic layer of lateral plate mesoderm, and these cells are called cardiac progenitor cells. So epiblastic cells pass through the primitive streak, give rise to mesodermal cells, which differentiate into mesenchyme and form cardiac progenitor cells, and these cardiac progenitor cells give rise to two heart fields, which are called primary heart field and secondary heart field, as we will presently discuss. So primary heart field, which is also known as cardiac crescent, this is formed first, and it is also uh, known as cardiac crescent because this is a crescent shaped structure or horseshoe shaped structure, or you can say U shaped structure having two limbs and a central part, and it appears from 16th to 18th day of development. So in the third week, just cranial to the middle plate in the splanchnic mesoderm, and by this time the splanchnic mesoderm has split. The lateral plate mesoderm in this region has split into two layers: the splanchnic mesoderm and somatic mesoderm. Somatic mesoderm is lying in contact with the surface ectoderm, and the splanchnic mesoderm is lying in contact with the endoderm. So it is in the splanchnic mesoderm that the primary heart field is formed in the area which is also known as cardiogenic area or cardiogenic plate. So there is a secondary heart field also which appears 4 or 5 days later, that's on 20 and 21 days of age of the embryo, 20th week and 20th day and 21st day. Now, what is the difference between the fate of these two heart fields? The primary heart field, or PHF as we abbreviate it, it contributes to the formation of atria, left ventricle, and a small part of right ventricle. And the secondary heart field, the cells which are present in the cardiac progenitor cells which are present in the secondary heart field, they form the remaining parts of the heart, that is most of the right ventricle, then the outflow tracts of the heart, which embryologically is conus cordis and truncus arteriosus, but in the adult heart it is the infundibulum of the right ventricle, aortic vestibule of the left ventricle, and the initial parts of the pulmonary trunk and ascending aorta. So this diagram shows the location of the primary heart field, which is a U-shaped, crescentic or horseshoe-shaped area lying just cranial to the neural plate in the splanchnic mesoderm. As you can see, the intraembryonic cavity or intraembryonic coelom has appeared, and it has split the intraembryonic mesoderm into two layers, to the somatopleuric and splanchnic or splanchnopleuric mesoderm. This is the splanchnic mesoderm. The primary heart field has appeared, starting somewhere on the 16th day of development, and in the cranial region of the heart, the intraembryonic coelom is known as pericardial cavity, and because the primary heart field is present in the floor of the pericardial cavity, because it lies in the splanchnic mesoderm. Splanchnic mesoderm is forming the floor of the pericardial cavity. It is lying in contact with the endoderm, and the roof is formed by the somatic mesoderm. And so this is the orientation of primary heart field and its location with regard to the intraembryonic seal. This is another diagram showing the primary heart field and secondary heart field. The secondary heart field location, you can see it is just medial to, inner to or medial to the primary heart field. And primary heart field appears first, and then, as you can very well imagine, secondary appears later. So this diagram shows the changes in the position of the heart as the folding in the head region occurs. Formation of head fold changes the position of the pericardial cavity, and the developing heart, uh, so that the developing heart at the end of the folding, at the completion of folding in the head region, comes to lie in the roof of the pericardial cavity, because there is complete 180-degree rotation in the cranial part of the embryo, resulting in the formation of head fold. And then that part of the endoderm or the yolk sac becomes included within the embryo at the as the foregut, and foregut ends at the oropharyngeal membrane, which you can see in this diagram also, which has been labeled as well. So next we pass to this discussion, and each limb of the heart field gives rise to one endothelial tube, and each of these endothelial tube is known as an endocardial heart tube. So there are two endothelial tubes representing two limbs of the primary and secondary heart field. So there are formed two endocardial heart tubes, and these two endocardial heart tubes lie in the floor of the pericardial cavity before folding of the embryo in the head region, before formation of the head fold. And then we know that head fold begins to be formed in the fourth week of development, and the lateral body folds will also be formed, because fourth week is the period of folding of the embryo. Instead of remaining a flat slipper shaped disc-like structure, the embryo folds in the fourth week to become a cylindrical structure, and the formation of head fold has great effects on the position of the heart, and similarly the formation of lateral body folds also affects the position of the heart tubes. So as the lateral body folds are formed, the endocardial heart tubes are brought close together, and the formation of head fold, as we have discussed, brings the cardiac primordium in the roof of the pericardial cavity when complete 180-degree folding in the head region has occurred. And another result of this complete 180-degree reversal in position, one result is that the heart primordium, instead of lying in the floor of the pericardial cavity, comes to lie in the roof. The second is that the original caudal end becomes cephalic end, and the original cranial end becomes the caudal end, because there is complete 180 reversal. And the lateral body folds, as they are formed, they come close to each other, and they cause the two endocardial heart tubes to move toward each other and to fuse with each other to form a single primary heart tube. And this fusion begins in the cranial region and then proceeds in the caudal direction. So this fusion does not take place throughout the length of the two endocardial heart tubes simultaneously, but first their cranial regions fuse, then gradually this fusion proceeds in a caudal direction, first most cranial region, then middle region, and finally the most caudal region will fuse to form one heart tube from the two endocardial heart tubes. And we know that the cranial end of each heart tube becomes the arterial end, because the dorsal aortae have been formed, and they are connected to the cranial end of the heart tube, So because of this fact, the cranial end becomes the arterial end, from which arise the first pair of aortic arches, which is actually the most cranial part of the two dorsal aortae. Later other aortic arches will also be formed. The caudal end, obviously it will become the venous end, and it becomes connected to the large veins running in the septum transversum, because the caudal end is buried in the septum transversum after the formation of the head fold. When the diaphragm will also develop from septum transversum, the large veins, the common cardinal veins, vitelline veins, and umbilical veins, three of right side, three of left side, these six veins are running in the septum transversum. So this diagram shows you the two endocardial heart tubes. First of all, the cardiogenic area and primary heart field and U-shaped primary heart field, and then formation of two endocardial heart tubes, one from each limb of the U-shaped or horseshoe-shaped or crescent-shaped cardiogenic area or primary heart field and secondary heart field, which are forming this cardiogenic area. And then, as you can see, they are coming close to each other, first in the cranial region, and then gradually they fuse to each other, and finally they form a single heart tube. At 22 days their fusion is complete, and then we can also recognize different regions in the single heart tube. Now there are no two endocardial heart tubes, but one single heart tube, which is also known as primary heart tube, and in this we can recognize different parts of the heart tube, which are truncus arteriosus, bulbus cordis, primitive ventricle, and primitive atrium, and then folding occurs, which we'll take later on. But in this diagram you can just concentrate upon fusion of the two separate endocardial heart tubes to form a separate endocardial tubes to form a single heart tube or single primary heart tube. So this diagram, the upper one, is a diagrammatic representation of the cardiogenic area into its two limbs, and formation of the dorsal aorta, also the neural plate, the U-shaped cardiogenic area found from primary and secondary heart fields, and the B and C diagrams are fluorescent microscopy diagrams. In the center there is neural tube, and on the sides these crescent shaped area where you can see the formation of capillaries, network of capillaries. This is the cardiogenic area being formed, and the dorsal aorta being formed in the B and C. The central structure is the neural plate. The margins of the neural plate are now rising to form the neural folds, and after formation neural folds, ultimately when neural folds will fuse, neural tube will be formed. So this is diagram, especially this diagram C is very interesting. This is scanning electron microscope picture of the two endocardial tubes. The two endocardial tubes, you can see they are lying side by side, very close to each other. They are fusing. The fusion is complete in the cranial region, and they will form a single heart tube, which in the diagram on the right side, this color diagram shows folding has occurred, and the two endocardial heart tubes are fusing and giving us to a single heart tube, which is now lying in the roof of the pericardial cavity. Then the cardiac regions, which we have discussed briefly already, and the single heart tube has been formed. The primary heart tube, in the beginning it's luminous, uniform throughout its length, but very soon it shows alternating dilatations and constrictions. Dilatation, then constriction, dilatation, then constriction, so that you can recognize different regions in this uh, tube, primary heart tube. In the ultimately, we will recognize 4 regions, but in the beginning, 3 regions are recognized, which are bulbous cordis, starting from the arterial end side, where the 2 dorsal aorta are attached. Bulbous cordis, then the primitive ventricle, then the primitive atrium, and later on, a 4th vein also becomes recognizable. It is known as sinus venosus, and as the name indicates, sinus means a space and venosus means venous space. It is found caudal to the atrium. It is the 4th vein. So now we have bulbous cordis, ventricle, atrium, and sinus venosus uh, going from the cranial to caudal end, or from arterial to venous end of the heart. So sinus venosus is formed at the venous end or caudal end, and is formed by the confluence of the 6 large veins running in the septum transversum, which I've told you, a pair of umbilical veins, a pair of vitelline veins, and pair of common cardinal. Here you can see the regions of the heart tube: the bulbous cordis, the ventricle, the atrium, the sinus venosus. Sinus venosus has 2 horns because it's formed by 3 veins of the right side and 3 large veins of the left side, and as they fuse with each other, they form a central part of body, and 2 horns. Each horn has opening of 3 veins, but later on the veins they change. Some of them disappear, some of them enlarge. So the regions of the heart: bulbous cordis, ventricle or primitive ventricle, atrium or primitive atrium, and then sinus venosus. These are 4 regions of the heart, or 4 parts of the heart tube, you can say. And then folding of the heart will take place, which is to be discussed later. At the juncture of bulbous cordis and ventricle, a fold will appear, which is known as bulboventricular fold, and the sulcus between them is known as bulboventricular sulcus, but that we will take later on. Just concentrate that the major part of the heart tube lies within the pericardial cavity, but in the beginning only the bulbous cordis, ventricle, and part of atrium is within the pericardial cavity, but later on pericardial cavity enlarges, and also the sinus venosus is pulled out of this atrium, and sinus venosus are pulled out of the septum transversum and brought into the pericardial cavity, and finally all the 4 chambers, when the folding is occurring, all the 4 chambers of the heart, the bulbous cordis, the ventricle, and the atrium, they come to lie within the pericardial cavity. Another diagram showing the regions of the heart, or parts of the primary heart tube: truncus arteriosus, bulbous cordis, ventricle, sinus venosus. This truncus arteriosus is actually a part of the bulbous cordis. So the basic 4 regions of the, or basic 4 parts of the heart tube are bulbous cordis, primitive ventricle, primitive atrium, and sinus venosus. Truncus arteriosus is the name given to the terminal part of the bulbous cordis, which will form the outflow uh, arteries of the heart, which are the ascending aorta and pulmonary trunk. So the wall of the heart shows 4 regions, but if we cut a section of the heart tube, we see that the wall of the heart tube is quite thick, and it shows 3 layers after some development. Initially, of course, there is just the endothelium, then the endocardial heart tubes are formed, then endocardial heart tubes fuse to form a single primary heart tube which is still consisting of endothelium, but then the surrounding mesodrum give rise to mesenchyme, and mesenchyme differentiates into cardiac muscle cells, and these cardiac muscle cells, they differentiate into cardiac layer of cardiac muscle which is present around the endothelium, and this thick coat of cardiac muscle around the endothelium is called myocardial mantle. But the myocardial mantle is not in direct contact with the endothelium. Between the myocardial mantle and the endothelium lies a jelly-like structure or gelatinous connective tissue is called cardiac jelly. But this is a temporary structure, and very soon it becomes reduced, it regresses and does not disappear completely but becomes reduced to a thin layer of connective tissue which is called subendocardium. So just beneath the endothelium, subendocardium is formed from the cardiac jelly, and then a layer is also formed outer to the myocardium. So endocardium is formed from the endothelium and subendothelial connective tissue. The subendothelial connective tissue is formed from the regression of the cardiac jelly. The myocardial mantle is now called myocardium, or muscle layer of the heart. It consists of cardiac muscle. And outer to the myocardium appears epicardium, which is the third layer of the heart. So finally, heart tube consists of three layers: endocardium, myocardium, epicardium. The epicardium is derived from a special organ in the dorsal mesocardium, which is called proepicardial organ. The dorsal mesocardium is actually a dorsal mesentery of the heart tube, by which the heart tube is suspended to the roof of the pericardial cavity. And in the caudal region of dorsal mesocardium, some cells differentiate and form a small organ or a small collection of cells which is called proepicardial organ, and from this proepicardial organs cells originate, then migrate and form a layer outer to the myocardium. This layer is called epicardium. So epicardium is derived from proepicardium, which itself is located in the caudal part of the mesocardium, and is to be regarded as a derivative of the mesocardium. So this diagram, which is the last diagram for today's discussion, shows a section of the heart. In the center is the lumen of the heart, and then then there is the endothelial heart tube, which is forming the endothelium of the future heart, and outer to that is the gelatinous substance which is called cardiac jelly, and outer to the cardiac jelly is the myocardial mantle, which is a layer of cardiac muscle, quite thick layer of cardiac muscle, and outer to that is the epicardium, which is derived from the proepicardial organ. And of course, then there is pericardial cavity, the two layers of the pericardial cavity. The pericardial cavity is lined by the visceral layer of pericardium, which is actually the epicardium, and the outer wall of the pericardial cavity is formed by the uh, somatic layer of uh, epicardium of the pericardium, which is not derived from the proepicardial organ. The parietal layer is not derived from the proepicardial organ. The epicardium is actually the visceral layer of pericardium, and it is derived from proepicardial organ. But the parietal layer, which is the outer layer, as you can see, which is forming the outer layer of the pericardial cavity, this is derived from ordinary mesenchyme. So here we finish with our discussion, and next time we will start with further development of the heart. Mainly we will start with the folding of the heart tube next time.